The Empire's reach. Commander Zethkora stood on the bridge of the Stellar Dominion, watching the vast expanse of space through the reinforced viewing portal. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this galaxy for over 10,000 years, their blue-scaled hands shaping the destiny of countless worlds. Today felt different, though. Today, they had found something impossible. "Commander," called out Navigation Officer Ylthera, her silver eyes gleaming with excitement. "The object is unlike anything in our databases. The metal composition suggests it's been drifting for at least 3 centuries, maybe more." The object in question was a ship, but not just any ship. This vessel displayed engineering principles that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about space travel. Where Zephyrian ships were elegant curves of biometal that grew rather than being built, this craft was angular, harsh, and brutally functional. "Bring us closer," Zethkora ordered, his 4 arms working the control surfaces with practiced precision. "Science Officer Kethvar, begin your analysis." Kethvar, the youngest member of their crew at barely 200 years old, moved to his station with eager steps. His species valued knowledge above all else, and this discovery promised secrets that could advance their civilization by centuries. The derelict mystery. As the Stellar Dominion approached the alien vessel, details became clearer. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the length of their own exploration craft, but its design spoke of desperate efficiency rather than luxury. Burn marks scarred its hull, and several sections appeared to have been sealed from the outside, suggesting emergency repairs made in the void of space. "Commander," Kethvar's voice carried a note of wonder, "I'm detecting multiple propulsion systems, not just one backup, but 5 completely different drive types. It's as if they built redundancy upon redundancy." "Paranoid species," suggested Ylthera. "Or practical ones," Zethkora murmured. In his centuries of service, he had learned that survival often required what others might call paranoia. The ship's hull bore markings in an unknown script. The symbols were clean and angular, lacking the flowing grace of Zephyrian writing or the crystalline complexity of Veltara runes. These were marks made by beings who valued clarity over beauty. "Can you translate the markings?" the commander asked. Kethvar's tentacles danced over his instruments. "Working on it. The script appears to be phonetic rather than symbolic. Very logical structure. I'm seeing repeated patterns that suggest, yes, this appears to be the vessel's name." He paused, working through the translation matrix. Something like, "Endurance." Inside the Endurance, the boarding party suited up in their environmental gear, though scans indicated the alien ship maintained a breathable atmosphere. Zephyrian technology allowed them to adapt to most environmental conditions, but Zethkora believed in taking no chances with the unknown. The airlock cycled open, revealing corridors that seemed impossibly cramped by Zephyrian standards. Everything was built for beings roughly half their size, and the lighting was harsh and white, rather than the soft blue they preferred. "The efficiency is remarkable," Kethvar observed, running his scanner along the walls. "Every surface serves multiple purposes. These panels can be removed to access maintenance areas. This section can be converted to emergency shelter, and these grooves appear to be handholds for zero-gravity maneuvering." They moved deeper into the ship, finding laboratories, living quarters, and engineering sections that spoke of a long journey through hostile space. The technology was primitive by Zephyrian standards. No biointegration, no psychic interfaces, but it was robust and clever. In what appeared to be the ship's main computer core, Kethvar made contact with the vessel's information systems. The interface was crude but intuitive, responding to touch and simple commands. Within moments, he had accessed vast databases of information. "Commander," he called out, his voice tight with excitement. "This species calls themselves humans. They're from a world they call Earth, and according to these records, they've been traveling for over 300 years. The human record. As Kethvar delved deeper into the human databases, a story began to emerge that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about galactic history. These humans had achieved space travel using nothing but chemical rockets and determination. Their computers were mechanical rather than biological, their ships built of metal and polymer rather than grown from living crystal. They had no psychic abilities, Kethvar reported, wonder evident in his voice. No telepathy, no precognitive skills, no ability to interface directly with their technology. They relied entirely on external tools and communication. How did they manage complex calculations? Ylthera asked. How did they navigate the void without instinctive space sense? Mathematics, Kethvar replied simply. Pure, abstract mathematics. They created machines to handle calculations too complex for their biological minds, and they developed instruments to measure what they couldn't sense naturally. The more they learned, the more impressed the Zephyrians became. These humans had faced challenges that would have stopped most species before they left their home system. They had no natural resistance to radiation, so they built shielding. They couldn't survive in vacuum, so they created life support systems of incredible complexity. They had no instinctive understanding of orbital mechanics, so they developed theories and equations that let them navigate by pure logic. Signs of desperation. The deeper records painted a darker picture. Earth's databases spoke of environmental collapse, resource depletion, and social upheaval. The humans had been forced to leave their home world not by curiosity or expansion, but by necessity. Their planet was dying, and they had to find new homes among the stars. Look at this, Kethvar called out, displaying a holographic map. They sent out dozens of ships, each heading in different directions. This one, the Endurance, was tasked with finding suitable worlds in this sector. The ship's logs told of 3 centuries of searching, of hope and disappointment, of technical failures overcome through ingenuity and determination. The humans aboard had lived entire lifetimes in space, raising children who would never see Earth, who knew only the cramped corridors and recycled air of their mobile home. Their population control was remarkable, Kethvar noted. They maintained genetic diversity through careful planning, kept their culture alive through education and tradition, and managed resources with precision that exceeds even our best efforts. But the most impressive aspect was their adaptability. When systems failed, they found alternatives. When food production dropped, they developed new growing techniques. When their original mission parameters became obsolete, they adapted their goals. They were survivors in the truest sense. The empty ship. Despite all their ingenuity, something had gone wrong. The ship was empty now, its corridors silent except for the hum of automated systems still faithfully maintaining life support for occupants who were no longer there. The escape pods are gone, Ylthera reported from the engineering section. All of them. Whatever happened, they had time to evacuate. Zethkora studied the final log entries. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was clear enough. They had found something. A planet, possibly habitable, definitely worth investigating. The decision had been made to abandon the Endurance and attempt a landing. But where? The commander wondered aloud. The navigation logs show they were heading toward that system. He gestured toward a cluster of stars visible through the viewport. But there are 17 worlds there. Which one did they choose? Kethvar was still absorbed in the human databases, learning about their culture, their history, their way of thinking. Commander, we need to find them. These beings, they think differently than we do. Their solutions to problems are unlike anything I've ever seen. They could teach us things we never imagined. If they're still alive, Ylthera pointed out. It's been at least 50 years since these final logs were recorded. Then we need to move quickly, Zethkora decided. Plot a course for that system. If these humans are alive, they deserve to know they're not alone in the universe anymore. The search begins. As the stellar dominion adjusted course toward the target system, Kethvar continued studying human records. He learned about their art, their philosophy, their dreams of reaching the stars. He discovered that they had no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no natural armor. Yet they had conquered their entire world through tool use and cooperation. Their literature spoke of hope in the face of impossible odds, of individuals making sacrifices for the good of their species, of never giving up even when defeat seemed certain. They had concepts the Zephyrians recognized: honor, duty, love, but they expressed them in ways that were entirely new. They have a saying, Kethvar told his crewmates. The stars are not so far apart as we are from each other. They understood that space was vast and empty, but they refused to let that stop them from trying to bridge the gaps. The world they built. The planet below defied all expectations. Where Zephyrian sensors had detected a barely habitable world with thin atmosphere and harsh conditions, human ingenuity had created something remarkable. From orbit, the stellar dominion could see geometric patterns carved into the landscape, not the organic curves favored by most galactic civilizations, but straight lines and perfect angles that spoke of mathematical precision. Those aren't cities, Ylthera observed, studying the sensor readings. They're farms, underground complexes. I can't identify the purpose. Kethvar had spent the journey learning human engineering principles, and the patterns made sense to him. They're maximizing efficiency. Every structure serves multiple purposes: housing, food production, manufacturing, defense. They've turned survival into an art form. Commander Zethkora opened communication channels, broadcasting on frequencies the human databases indicated they used. The response came quickly, not the harmonious tones of Zephyrian communication, but sharp, rapid bursts of electromagnetic signals that carried vast amounts of information in compressed formats. They're asking who we are and what we want, Kethvar translated, his understanding of human language now fluent. They're also scanning us. Their technology is crude but effective. They know everything about our ship's capabilities already. First contact protocol. The humans requested a meeting in orbit rather than inviting the Zephyrians to land. It was a smart precaution. They knew nothing about their visitors and weren't taking chances. A small craft launched from the planet's surface, its design clearly evolved from the escape pods they had found on the Endurance. The human ship was tiny compared to the stellar dominion, but it moved with precision and purpose. As it approached, Kethvar noticed something remarkable. It wasn't following a standard orbital approach pattern. Instead, it was moving in a complex spiral that would make it nearly impossible to track with conventional weapons. They assume we might be hostile, he observed. Even in first contact, they're thinking tactically. The human delegation consisted of 3 individuals, though the Zephyrians only learned this when the airlock opened. The environmental suits they wore were bulky and primitive, but they moved with confidence despite being surrounded by aliens twice their size. The lead human removed her helmet, revealing features that the Zephyrians found both familiar and alien. 2 eyes instead of 4, hair instead of scales, but an expression of intelligent curiosity that transcended species boundaries. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, she said in clear, precise tones. We detected your approach 3 days ago. We've been wondering when someone would finally find us. The last of Earth. Dr. Vasquez was not what the Zephyrians had expected. She was small, even by human standards, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent in harsh conditions. But there was a strength to her presence that filled the room, a confidence that came from having survived the impossible. You've been studying our ship, she continued, gesturing toward the data tablets her companions carried. The Endurance. I helped design her life support systems, back when I thought we'd only need them for a few decades. Kethvar stepped forward, his translator device rendering his words into human language. Dr. Vasquez, we are the Zephyrian Exploration Corps. We found your vessel and have been learning about your people. We didn't know humans still existed. Elena's expression shifted, and for a moment the Zephyrians saw the weight of centuries in her eyes. Most of us don't. Earth died 237 years ago. The last transmission we received from home was a warning that the atmospheric collapse had accelerated beyond all models. She paused, collecting herself. There were 47 colony ships. We've heard from 6 of them over the centuries. 2 found habitable worlds. 3 are still searching. 1 went silent 30 years ago. We don't know about the others. The revelation hit the Zephyrians like a physical blow. They were looking at the survivors of a species that had scattered across the galaxy in a desperate attempt to preserve their civilization. These weren't explorers or conquerors. They were refugees who had succeeded against impossible odds. The human solution. Over the following hours, Dr. Vasquez and her team shared their story. The Endurance had indeed found this world, designated New Haven in their records, but it had been barely habitable. The atmosphere was too thin, the temperature too cold, the soil lacking in essential nutrients. Any sensible species would have moved on, Elena explained. But we couldn't. Our fuel was nearly exhausted, our ship was breaking down, and we had 1,300 people who needed a home. So we made this world work. The solution had been audacious in its scope. Instead of trying to terraform the entire planet, they had focused on creating sustainable microenvironments, underground cities connected by tunnel networks, atmospheric processors that created breathable air in enclosed spaces, hydroponic farms that could grow food in artificial soil. We had no choice but to innovate, Elena continued. Every problem was a puzzle to solve, every failure a chance to learn something new. We developed new materials science, new agricultural techniques, new ways of recycling everything from air to organic waste. Kethvar was fascinated by their approach. Where Zephyrian science sought to understand and work with natural systems, humans seemed to delight in creating entirely new solutions. They didn't adapt to their environment. They adapted their environment to themselves. "Show me," he requested. "I want to understand how you think, how you solve problems that should be impossible." The underground city. Elena led them through New Haven's primary settlement, a vast underground complex that defied easy description. Tunnels carved from living rock connected chambers that served as homes, workshops, laboratories, and farms. Everything was compact, but not cramped, efficient, but not sterile. "We learned from ant colonies," Elena explained as they walked. "Individual spaces are small, but the network as a whole is incredibly robust. Damage to one section doesn't threaten the whole community." The Zephyrians saw humans everywhere, working in laboratories, tending vertical farms, teaching children, creating art from recycled materials. Despite the harsh conditions, there was an energy to the place, a sense of purpose and hope that impressed their visitors. "How many of you are there now?" Yilthera asked. "About 4,000, Elena replied. "We've maintained careful population control, but we're stable. Our genetic diversity is sufficient, our resource base is sustainable, and our technology keeps improving." They visited a laboratory where human scientists were working with materials that looked familiar to Kethvar, but the applications were entirely new. "We've had to become experts at making something from nothing," one researcher explained. "This plastic is made from atmospheric carbon and trace minerals. It's stronger than most metals and completely recyclable." Cultural exchange. The cultural differences became apparent during their extended visit. Humans worked in small, focused teams rather than the large consensus groups favored by Zephyrians. They made decisions quickly, often with incomplete information, trusting in their ability to adapt if their initial approach proved wrong. "We call it failing fast," Elena explained. "If you're going to make a mistake, make it quickly and learn from it. Perfection is the enemy of progress." This philosophy extended to every aspect of human society. Their art was experimental and evolving. Their science was built on testing and retesting theories. Their governance was a constant balance of competing ideas rather than harmonious consensus. "Don't you find conflict exhausting?" Commander Zethkora asked during one of their discussions. Elena smiled. "Conflict is how we grow. When ideas compete, the best ones survive, and the weak ones are discarded. It's not comfortable, but it works. The humans had developed technologies that the Zephyrians found crude but effective. Their computers were electronic rather than biological. Their vehicles used chemical rather than gravitational propulsion. Their communication systems were electromagnetic rather than psychic. Yet these primitive technologies had allowed them to accomplish things that impressed their advanced visitors. The price of survival. As the days passed, the Zephyrians began to understand the cost of human survival. Every adult carried scars, psychological if not physical, from the struggles of the early years. Children learned mathematics and engineering alongside basic literacy because technical knowledge was essential for survival. We lost the luxury of specialization, Elena admitted during a quiet moment. Everyone needs to understand multiple systems, multiple skills. We can't afford to have knowledge locked away in the minds of a few experts. The social structure reflected this reality. Leadership was fluid, based on expertise and situation rather than heredity or politics. The person who led a farming project might be a follower in an engineering discussion, and vice versa. How do you maintain order? Yilthera wondered. We don't, Elena replied. We maintain cooperation. Everyone understands that their survival depends on the group's success. Individual achievement means nothing if the community fails. The humans had also developed remarkable resilience. Their history was full of disasters, system failures, accidents, conflicts, but they had learned from each setback and emerged stronger. Their motto, carved into the wall of the main assembly hall, read simply, "Adapt and overcome." The teacher becomes student. As Kethavar spent more time with human scientists and engineers, he began to see problems differently. Where Zephyrian solutions sought harmony and balance, human approaches often involved controlled chaos and dynamic systems. They were comfortable with uncertainty in ways that challenged his fundamental assumptions. You think in straight lines, Dr. Vasquez observed during one of their technical discussions. Cause leads to effect, problem leads to solution. We think in networks. Everything affects everything else, and you have to manage the whole system rather than optimizing individual parts. She demonstrated with a simple example from their water recycling system. Instead of a linear process that purified water step by step, the humans had created a closed loop where waste from one process became input for another. It was more complex to manage, but far more efficient and resilient. Your technology is more advanced, she continued, but I wonder if it's more fragile. What happens when your biocomputers get sick? When your psychic networks are disrupted? We've built our systems to work even when individual components fail. The question troubled Kethavar because he realized she was right. Zephyrian technology was elegant and powerful, but it depended on biological systems that could be vulnerable to disease, psychological networks that could be disrupted by trauma, social harmony that could be shattered by conflict. The revelation. On their final day at New Haven, Elena made an offer that stunned the Zephyrian delegation. "We'd like to share our knowledge with you," she said. "Our technologies, our problem-solving methods, our cultural innovations, not as a trade, but as a gift." "What do you want in return?" Commander Zethkor asked, suspicious of such generosity. "Nothing," Elena replied, "except perhaps news of the other colony ships, if you encounter them in your travels. We've survived because we learned to think differently. Maybe that knowledge can help others survive too." It was then that Kethavar understood the true nature of human strength. It wasn't their technology or their resilience, though both were impressive. It was their willingness to share, to learn, to adapt their own thinking based on new information. They had survived not by becoming harder, but by becoming more flexible. "There's something else," Elena added quietly, "something we haven't told you about ourselves." She led them to a sealed section of the colony, past security doors and through chambers that hummed with unfamiliar energy. At the center was a laboratory unlike anything they had seen. Clean, bright, filled with equipment that seemed far more advanced than anything else in the colony. "We've been experimenting," Elena explained. Learning to work with technologies we've discovered in this system, ancient technologies, left behind by whoever lived here before us. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just survived, they had begun to evolve, combining their ingenuity with tools and knowledge left by previous civilizations. They were becoming something new, something that could bridge the gap between primitive determination and advanced technology. As the stellar dominion prepared to depart, Kethvar realized that this first contact had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The humans had taught him that survival wasn't about having the best tools or the most advanced technology. It was about never giving up, never stopping to learn, never accepting that a problem was unsolvable. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they had time to grow. Seeds of Tomorrow. The return journey. The voyage back to Zephyrian space gave Kethvar time to process everything he had learned. The data crystals Elena had given them contained not just technical specifications, but entire philosophical frameworks for approaching problems. Human solutions often seemed impossible until you understood the thinking behind them. Commander Zethkora had been unusually quiet since leaving New Haven. Finally, as they approached the outer markers of the Empire, he spoke. We need to be careful about how we present this discovery. The implications are significant. Ylthera looked up from her navigation console. You think the Council will see humans as a threat. I think the Council will see change, the commander replied. And change makes people nervous, especially when it comes from a species that thinks so differently from us. Kethvar understood the concern. Zephyrian society valued stability and consensus. The human approach of embracing conflict and rapid adaptation could be seen as dangerous to a civilization that had maintained order for 10,000 years. But he also remembered Elena's words about the galaxy being vast and empty. Perhaps it was time for that to change. The Council's reaction. The High Council of Zephyr received their report in the crystal dome chamber that had been the seat of galactic government longer than most species had existed. The 12 council members listened in silence as Kethvar presented his findings, their 4 eyes unblinking as they absorbed the implications. You're telling us, said Council Prime Veth Mera, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, that this human species has not only survived the death of their home world, but has actually thrived using technologies we consider primitive. More than thrived, Kethvar replied. They've innovated. They've created solutions to problems we didn't know existed. Their approach to engineering, to social organization, to problem-solving itself, it's unlike anything in our databases. Council member Jithkilar, known for his conservative views, leaned forward. And you believe we should? What? Learn from beings who barely understand the basics of psychic integration. I believe we should learn from beings who don't need psychic integration, Kethvar answered. They've accomplished remarkable things using only external tools and pure logic. Their methods could complement our own, make us more resilient, more adaptable. The debate that followed lasted for days. Some council members saw opportunity, new technologies, new approaches to old problems, new perspectives on challenges the Empire had struggled with for centuries. Others saw danger, a chaotic influence that could destabilize the careful balance that had kept galactic peace for millennia. The proposal. It was Council member Zera Lin, the youngest of the 12, who proposed the compromise. We establish an exchange program, she suggested. Small scale, carefully monitored. We invite human representatives to visit our worlds, and we send our own people to study with them. Cultural contamination. Jithkilar objected. Their chaotic methods could undermine our social stability. Or their adaptive methods could strengthen our resilience, Zeralin countered. We've maintained order for 10,000 years, but at what cost? Our technology has stagnated, our society has become rigid, our responses to new challenges have become predictable. Kethvar seized the moment. The humans call it hybrid vigor, the strength that comes from combining different genetic lines. Perhaps the same principle applies to ideas, to methods of thinking and problem-solving. The vote was close, 7 in favor, 5 opposed. The Human-Zephyrian Cultural Exchange Program was authorized, with Kethvar designated as the primary liaison. His first task would be to return to New Haven and invite Dr. Vasquez to visit the Empire's capital world. Elena's journey. 3 months later, Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel, watching the blue-green marble of Zephyr Prime grow larger in the viewport. She had never seen a world so perfect: crystalline cities that grew like coral reefs, atmospheric processors that painted the sky in shades of azure and silver, orbital stations that moved in perfect harmony with the planet's rotation. "It's beautiful," she told Kethvar, who stood beside her, "like a work of art." "It took us 3,000 years to achieve this harmony," he replied with pride. "Every system perfectly balanced, every process optimized for efficiency and sustainability." Elena studied the planet more carefully. What happens when something goes wrong? When you need to change something quickly? The question made Kethvar uncomfortable. "Our systems are designed not to fail. We plan for every contingency." "But you can't plan for everything," Elena pointed out. "What about the unknown unknowns? The problems you don't see coming?" It was a conversation they would return to many times during Elena's stay on Zephyr Prime. The Zephyrians had created something magnificent, but Elena's human perspective revealed vulnerabilities they had never considered. The teacher and the student. Elena's first lecture at the Zephyrian Science Institute drew a capacity crowd. Scientists, engineers, and philosophers came to hear the primitive aliens speak about problem-solving methods. Many expected to be amused by the crude approaches of an underdeveloped species. Instead, they found themselves challenged in ways they had never experienced. "Your gravitational drive systems are beautiful," Elena began, studying the holographic displays that showed their technology. "Elegant, efficient, perfectly integrated with your ship's bioneural networks. But what happens if the bioneural system gets infected? If the gravitational field generator develops a resonance frequency that interferes with the crew's psychic abilities?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Such failures were possible, but rare, and the Zephyrians preferred not to think about them. "Now, let me show you how humans would approach the same problem," Elena continued. She activated her portable display, showing the crude but robust systems aboard the Endurance. Multiple redundant systems, each using different principles. Chemical rockets for primary propulsion, ion drives for precision maneuvering, solar sails for emergency backup. If one system fails, you still have others. "But it's so inelegant," protested Dr. Vithmorin, one of the Institute's senior researchers. "So wasteful." "Is survival wasteful?" Elena asked. "Is redundancy really less elegant than failure?" The breakthrough. The real breakthrough came when Elena was shown one of the Empire's greatest challenges, the void storms that periodically swept through certain sectors of space, disrupting psychic networks and bioneural systems. For centuries, Zephyrian ships had simply avoided these regions, accepting the limitations they imposed on travel and exploration. "You're thinking about this wrong," Elena told the assembled team of experts. "You're trying to work around the problem instead of solving it." She spent 3 days studying their sensor data, learning about the physics of void storms, understanding how they interfered with biological and psychic systems. Then she presented her solution. "Build hybrid ships," she proposed. "Primary systems that use your advanced bioneural technology for normal operation, but backup systems that rely purely on electronic and mechanical principles. When you enter a void storm, you switch to the backup systems and navigate using pure mathematics and sensor data." The idea was radical. It violated fundamental principles of Zephyrian design philosophy, but computer simulations showed that it would work, and work reliably. "It's not just about the technology," Elena explained to Kethvar as they watched the simulations run. "It's about changing how you think about problems. Instead of seeking perfect solutions, you build robust systems that can handle imperfection." The network grows. Word of Elena's insights spread throughout the Empire, and soon other human survivors were being contacted and invited to share their knowledge. Dr. Marcus Chen from the colony ship New Horizon brought expertise in closed-loop ecological systems. Engineer Sarah Kim from the Resilience demonstrated revolutionary approaches to materials science. Philosopher Dr. James Okafor from the Second Dawn challenged fundamental assumptions about social organization and decision-making. Each human perspective added new dimensions to Zephyrian understanding. They learned about fail-safe design principles, where systems were built to fail in predictable and safe ways. They discovered emergent solutions, where complex problems were solved by allowing simple systems to interact in unpredictable ways. They explored adaptive governance, where rules and structures changed in response to new challenges. The humans, for their part, gained access to technologies and knowledge that could transform their scattered colonies. Zephyrian medical techniques could extend human lifespans. Their energy systems could power larger settlements. Their transportation technology could reconnect the scattered survivors of Earth. The hybrid generation. 5 years after first contact, the first hybrid technologies began appearing throughout the Empire. Starships that combined bioneural elegance with mechanical redundancy. Computer systems that used both psychic interfaces and electronic backups. Social structures that balanced consensus building with rapid decision-making capabilities. The most dramatic example was the redesign of Zephyr Prime's atmospheric processors. The original systems were works of art, perfectly tuned biological mechanisms that had maintained the planet's air quality for millennia. But Alina's analysis had revealed a troubling vulnerability. If certain bacterial strains mutated, they could cascade through the entire system and poison the atmosphere within days. The hybrid solution maintained the elegant biological systems as the primary mechanism, but added mechanical scrubbers and chemical processors as backups. The planet was now protected against failures that had previously been unthinkable. "You've made us paranoid," Kethvar joked during one of his regular conversations with Alina. "I've made you prepared," she corrected. "There's a difference between useful paranoia and crippling fear." The philosophical revolution. Perhaps the most profound changes came not in technology, but in thinking. Zephyrian society had always valued harmony and consensus, but exposure to human ideas introduced new concepts of productive conflict and creative tension. Young Zephyrians began questioning assumptions that had gone unchallenged for generations. They proposed alternative solutions to old problems, experimented with new forms of art and literature, and pushed the boundaries of what their society considered acceptable. The older generation was often disturbed by these changes, but the results were undeniable. Scientific innovation accelerated. Economic productivity increased. Social problems that had persisted for centuries began finding solutions. "Change is frightening," the Lina admitted during a philosophical discussion with Council Prime Vethmera. "But stagnation is death. You've built something beautiful here, but beauty without growth becomes a monument to the past instead of a foundation for the future." The Council Prime, who had initially opposed the exchange program, found herself nodding in agreement. "Perhaps our pursuit of perfection made us forget that perfection is not a destination, but a process." The galactic impact. As news of the human-Zephyrian collaboration spread throughout the galaxy, other species began taking notice. The Veltar Crystalline Collective, ancient rivals of the Zephyrians, requested their own cultural exchange programs. The nomadic Threxil wanted to learn human techniques for surviving in hostile environments. Even the mysterious Quanthec emerged from their isolation to study human problem-solving methods. Each species brought their own perspectives and challenges. The Veltar were masters of information processing, but struggled with physical adaptability. The Threxil were expert survivors, but had difficulty with long-term planning. The Quanthec possessed incredible individual intelligence, but had never developed effective cooperation. Human methods proved adaptable to each culture, not as solutions to copy, but as approaches to modify and integrate with existing strengths. The galaxy began to see innovation on a scale not witnessed since the early days of star travel. Elena's legacy. 10 years after first contact, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood once again on the observation deck of a starship, but this time she was watching the construction of Nexus Station, a joint project involving 17 different species, each contributing their unique expertise to create something unprecedented. The station itself embodied human design philosophy, redundant systems, modular construction, adaptive architecture that could be reconfigured as needs changed. But it also incorporated the best of every participating culture: Zephyrian bioneural networks, Veltar crystalline matrices, Threxil survival systems, and technologies from a dozen other species. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, Kethvar observed, joining her at the viewport, wasn't any particular technology. It was the idea that different doesn't mean wrong. Elena smiled, her hair now completely silver, but her eyes still bright with curiosity. We learned that lesson the hard way. When your planet dies and you're scattered across the galaxy, you discover that survival depends on adaptation. You become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Around them, the station hummed with activity as beings from across the galaxy worked together on projects that would have been impossible just a decade earlier. Human crews worked alongside Zephyrian biotechnicians, Veltar data specialists collaborated with Threxil engineers, and quantic theorists shared insights with practical problem solvers from a dozen worlds. The new galaxy. The changes rippled outward from every point of contact. Trade routes that had remained static for millennia began shifting as new technologies made previously impossible journeys practical. Scientific advances accelerated as different species learned to combine their approaches. Art and culture flourished as creators drew inspiration from alien perspectives. Not all the changes were welcome. Some species resisted the new ideas, preferring the stability of their traditional ways. Others embraced change too eagerly, destabilizing their societies with rapid transformations. There were conflicts, misunderstandings, and failures. But the overall trend was clear. The galaxy was becoming more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of facing unknown challenges. The rigid order that had maintained peace through stagnation was being replaced by dynamic stability that could bend without breaking. We call it the Second Renaissance, Elena explained to a gathering of galactic historians. Not because we're returning to some golden age of the past, but because we're learning to think in new ways about old problems. The term caught on, and soon the period following first contact with humanity was officially designated as such in the galactic archives. Future historians would mark it as the turning point when the galaxy stopped simply maintaining itself and began growing again. The long view. In her final years, Elena often reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her from the dying Earth to the center of galactic civilization. She had started as a refugee, fleeing a world that could no longer sustain human life. She had become a teacher, sharing the hard-won wisdom of a species that had learned to thrive in impossible conditions. But perhaps most importantly, she had become a bridge, connecting not just humans and Zephyrians, but all the diverse species of the galaxy in a network of mutual learning and adaptation. Humanity's story isn't over, she told her final gathering of students, representatives from 43 different species who had come to learn from the small human woman who had changed their galaxy. It's just beginning. We scattered across the stars out of necessity, but now we're connected by choice. She gestured toward the star map that dominated the lecture hall, showing the locations of human colonies, alien homeworlds, and the trade routes that connected them all. We learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It's about being the most adaptable. It's about never giving up, never stopping to learn, never accepting that a problem can't be solved. And most importantly, she concluded, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human experience. It's about remembering that we're stronger together than we ever could be apart. The continuing story. As Elena's story came to an end, the larger story of human influence on the galaxy was just beginning. The scattered children of Earth had found each other again, connected not by shared genetics, but by shared values of curiosity, resilience, and adaptability. They had taught the galaxy that diversity was strength, that different approaches to problems could complement each other. That change was not something to fear, but something to embrace. They had shown that even a species without natural weapons, without psychic abilities, without advanced technology, could change the course of galactic civilization through nothing more than determination and ingenuity. The stars, once so far apart, had become connected by the threads of understanding that humanity had helped weave. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known, that the greatest adventures were not found in conquering new worlds, but in discovering new ways to think about old challenges. And in the end, that was perhaps the most human legacy of all. The idea that no matter how dark the void between the stars, there was always reason to hope, always room to grow, always one more problem to solve, and one more boundary to cross. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. The end.